right. Well, good morning. Welcome to our morning devotions. And this is episode 184. This is Friday, the 28th, and the last day of February. March starts tomorrow. Episode 184, 2 Samuel 14. I posted verses 23 through 33. This is in regards to the return of Absalom and the king's odd response. That's what I entitled this. The return of Absalom and the king, or David's odd response. Now, the way this starts, and I'm not going to deal with the first part of this because it's a scenario that Joab creates that tells this widow lady to tell David. The first half of this chapter is all Joab's scheme through this widow lady at Tekoa to tell this grandiose story to get David to think about bringing Absalom back. And it's somewhat convoluted, it's veiled, but anyway, that's the purpose of it. And it starts here in verse 1 of 14. It says, Now Joab the son of Zeruiah perceived that the king's heart was toward Absalom, and Joab sent to Tekoa and fetched thence a wise woman, that is, someone that was skilled in rhetoric, that could keep her facts straight, make a linear argument here, begin to guide David's thinking down a particular path. That's what we're talking about here when it talks about a wise woman. And said unto her, I pray thee, feign thyself. Now, this is all going to be acting. Play this part. Feign thyself, this wise woman of Tekoa, to be a mourner. That is, you are mourning, and put on now mourning apparel, and anoint not thyself with oil. That is, as if you've been mourning for some time, but be as a woman that hath a long time mourned for the dead. Look like you've been mourning for the dead a long time. None of this is true. This is a way to deceive the king, to get him to think along this scenario. This is one gigantic con job, and I'm not going to go through it all because it gets. I mean, I didn't know if it would work very well for devotions because the way it's argued is very. I mean, there's a lot of innuendo in here. It's hard to get across. I mean, you need. I read it a whole bunch of times and put all kinds of notes in my Bible here. But basically, what it is Joab is going to create this entire possible world, which none of it is true, based on this woman, to sit down with David and try to convince him that David should bring Absalom back. And basically that Absalom, the fact that he's still alive must mean you still have something in store for him, and that when water falls on the ground, it's just lost in like the death of Ammon. I mean, it's too bad, but it's gone now, and let's not worry about that. But we have to save your son and bring him back to Jerusalem so he doesn't die in exile. All right? Essentially, this is what it's all about. And then it comes down after, finally, David gets the drift of all of this. All right, that the whole idea here is Joab has set up this huge scheme. And I just want you to note here, without going through it all, because David doesn't recognize that it's Joab's scheme till he gets down to verse 19. He's listened to this whole thing. He says, yes, basically what happens is one of my sons killed another son. So the avenger, right, the avenger is coming to take my son, and not only my son, but you're going to kill me too, because they killed the other boy. And we're both going to die, and our inheritance is going to be lost in the land. And David has sympathy for this woman and said, that's not going to happen, essentially, that I'll protect you. And then she rolls that over, that you're protecting the guilty son and the mom, which she's saying is her in this make-believe boy, and applying that now to Absalom, who was guilty of murder. The dead one is Ammon, but hey, let bygones be bygones. And shouldn't we consider then bringing the living son, who is the heir, back? If you're going to protect me and my guilty son, then perhaps you should apply the same thing to your son Absalom. That, in a nutshell, is what this is all about. And then finally you get down here to verse 19 of this, and David now is getting the drift of all this, that this is all one big con job. And I want you to think, too, because church people don't think this way. We just don't. But sometimes, in an effort to deceive you, it gets very, very complex. The deception is very deep. It's not simple. It's got many layers. All right. Here, the general of his army, he's got to find this woman of Tekoa. They have to devise this old plan, and then they got to get together with the king, and now they're going to interact with the king on this until the king, who's in a position of authority, actually begins to think in terms of this big con job. All right. And so that's what's happening here, because indeed Absalom, the reason he ran is because he did kill Ammon, and he is, so to speak, his half brother, right? And if you're going to save me in my make believe story here with my son, then you should save your son too, because the dead son is gone, just like my fake dead son is gone, and now Ammon is gone. But she says, "For we must needs die." Here's your argument. Everybody's going to die anyway. Whether he's killed in youth or whether he dies in old age, it doesn't matter. Everybody's going to die. What, you like that argument? She is making an argument here to overlook the murder of Ammon, these are the words that Joab put in her mouth. We see here. This is like it's like if it was in a more beneficial or benevolent context, we'd say this is a great illustration of inspiration. God puts his words in the mouth of the prophets. Here, Joab put his words in the mouth of this widow lady only to deceive David. He said, "For we must needs die and are as water spilt on the ground." That is, once water is spilt on the ground, this illustration, they've used this before. It's like it's lost. It's just the way it is. It goes in the ground. You can't gather it up. That's what death is like. So Ammon is there. We're all going to die, and you can't gather it up. You can't repeat it. It's going to happen to us all. So let's not dwell on the fact that Absalom actually killed his brother, and it doesn't say it here, but in the background we have, and why did he kill her? Well, he killed her because he raped her. So there's even this kind of moral equivocation, undoubtedly, that's going on at the same time. It said, "And we're all as water spilt on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Neither does God respect any persons. Yet doth he devise means that his banished be not expelled from him." That is, there's a way to get around this, that the banished are not permanently expelled, the fact that he's still alive. You see, we still can work with the living. That is the point. And it comes down here. And David listens, and he's on board until you get down here to verse 18. It says, "Then the king answered and said unto the woman, Hide not from me, I pray thee, the thing that I shall ask thee. And the woman said, Let my lord the king now speak." All right. And the king said, here we go. Now he realizes what's going on. "Is not the hand of Joab with thee in all this?" He knows his nephew. Isn't Joab behind all this? Because Joab's the one that wants to get things repaired here. Aren't you just an extension of the hand of Joab, trying to convince me with this grandiose story that I need to get Absalom back in town? Isn't that what this is about? And then she says, "And the woman answered and said, As thy soul liveth, my lord the king, none can turn to the right hand or to the left from aught that my lord the king hath spoken." That is, he's just saying that you spoke absolutely truly. He said, "For thy servant Joab, he bade me, and he put all these words in my mouth of thine handmaid." Yeah, he told me all this to say, to get you thinking about getting Absalom back in town. The whole chapter is about how to get Absalom back, because David is pining the loss of Absalom because he went to Geshur. That's what this is all about. Is that we're gonna find out later as we get through 2 Samuel why this is so important. Absalom is going to be a key player in the life of David here, and he's going to go to war with David, and he's going to drive David out of Jerusalem and take his throne for a while. I mean, this is his son, all right, that David is pining over, who also wants to kill his dad later on. He said, "For thy servant Joab he bade me," and then in verse 20, "to fetch about this form of speech." To fetch about this form of speech is simply to say to conjure up this whole scenario. To conjure up this scenario that I'm presenting to you, this possible world that'll get you to think about getting Absalom back. "To fetch about this form of speech hath thy servant Joab done this thing. And my Lord is wise according to the wisdom of the angel of God to know all things that are in the earth. And of course, this is just a common woman speaking to the king, all right, but she's talking about his wisdom and his ability to deliberate and to determine really what's going on. And then we start in verse 21, which is now a transition. We're beyond this ploy that Joab employed. And it comes to verse 21, and the king said unto Joab, see, now there's a paragraph break in 21 because now the woman's gone. And now, because Joab's the one that did this, the king is now talking to Joab, who set this all up. Because apparently Joab doesn't think that he's going to listen to Joab. He's got to find another means in this roundabout scenario. It is reminiscent of Nathan's story, isn't it? About the death of taking Bathsheba and killing Uriah. All right, because David's on board and he says, "Yeah, let's let's prosecute the one." And he says, "You're the one." And here it is. It's all the way around. Again, only in this case, my son is reference to your Absalom, and everybody's after us, and I know he killed somebody, but let's try to get him back in town. All of that, this is all a reference to David. It says this. It said, and the king said unto Joab, behold, now I have done this thing. Go therefore, bring the young man Absalom again. So he said, okay, Joab, I'm going to buy this scenario. I understand what I've been told. It says, okay, bring Absalom back. Bring Absalom back to town. And it says, and Joab fell to the ground on his face and bowed himself and thanked the king. And Joab said, it's very interesting here. The king, this is the general. I mean, he so appreciates what David is doing. He's approving of this to get Absalom back. He said, and Joab said, today thy servant knoweth that I have found grace in thy sight, my lord. Yes, because I sent this lady to con you, and you're telling me I'm going to go along with it and not doing something more adverse as far as the fact that I've just led you down this primrose path. All right. So he said, today thy servant knoweth that I have found grace in thy sight, my lord, the king, and that the king hath fulfilled the request of his servant, that is, to get Absalom back. And Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. And here we go. Now, from 24 down, this is why I said that this is the king's odd response. And I remember when I was a kid, I know most of the stuff I learned from my mom, from my dad, but my mom here just had such insight when I was a kid looking at this, and it's really her words that stick in my head in regards to David's response to Absalom, because he wants him to come back, he pines for him to come back, and he tells Joab to bring him back. So just put yourself in the king's shoes, in David's shoes. You want to see your son. You sent your general to go get him. You want to see him. You're pining. You love him so you send him and you bring him to Jerusalem. What is the next thing you would do? What is the next thing you would do? What would be the first stop that you would tell Joab to make? Stop by my place because I want to see my son. This one that I love and that I've been pining for, I long for, I want to go get him, and now he's back in town. I mean, there should have been some passion after all of that on the part of David to actually go see his boy. Listen to this. This is why this is odd. It's I don't know, I was going to say messed up, but there is something so unusual. I had one of my best friends in the whole world called me yesterday because he's been watching this stuff. And just wonderful insights into the text, and it encourages me. I hope I can be an encouragement to you and to him to get calls and comments like this as well, and discuss theology the way that we do. I mean, it was a great time that we had together. But here it is. It says in verse 24, and the king said, "Let him turn to his own house, take him to his place, and let him not see my face." So Joab goes and gets him, but he says, just send him home. Take him to his place in town. Don't bring him to the palace to see me. What in the world? See? You're supposed to be saying, what in the world is this? This isn't what you would expect from a dad to his son and everything they've gone through. So Absalom returned to his own house and saw not the king's face. But the thing is, it's not just this verse. If you go down to 28, it says, so Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem and saw not the king's face. Your son is just across town or down the road. You haven't seen him. You love him. You've been pining for him. You want to see him. You long for him. He's in town 2 years and you never have him over for dinner. You never meet him for coffee. You don't text him or call him on the phone and say, hey, Absalom, how you doing? For 2 years, Dad just, so to speak, ignores this one that up until this time, I mean, his service as the king is being, eroded because he can't get Absalom off his mind. And it's 2 years. That's why I said this is an odd response. And I can't really explain what this is. My mom didn't explain this to me, just explained that this was the case. And Absalom is going to do something really crazy here. I'm not going to go in just a minute to get everybody's attention. But here, let's go to talk about Absalom now. Now, Absalom is a perfect candidate, so to speak, to be the king.